want to be involved in the show.
Thank you. I think that's a good way to start. Kirith.
Thank you, Chair. Jack, what research did you carry out when developing and making the show? What did you learn, and did anything surprise you or stand out to you in your research?
So the start of all this stuff is to research as much as possible, and basically you plunge your head into books, into the internet, into talking to people and trying to get a sense of everything. Yeah. Actually, what my research started on at first was how Jamie would be processed through the criminal justice system, in particular that first day. Yeah. And I knew that I had an hour to get into an interview, and I had to do that as authentically as possible. Yeah. So that was my initial aim. The question was always, why did Jamie do it? And we knew that we wanted it to be a drama in which it ended with, in episode 1, it ended with, you knew that he did it. So we wanted to do a why done it, not a who done it, is the way we grandly described it. Yeah. And then, but answering that question was very complicated and involved a whole number of other factors. And one of those factors involved, Stephen said to me right at the beginning, I don't want to make this easy. I don't want this to be the sort of show where, it's because he had an alcoholic father, or it's because he had an abusive mother, or because the sort of drama tropes that you normally get in these sorts of shows. And that was a difficult thing to engage with, because it meant that I couldn't do the normal things that the drama tropes are actually very helpful when you're working on a show. Yeah. And so we then set about trying to work out a whole number of factors that would have affected Jamie, but I was still not finding something which felt right. I wasn't finding a complete character. And then someone that worked with me, Mariella Johnson, said to me, I think you need to look at incel culture, and I think you need to look at the manosphere. And as soon as I looked at that, that was the final missing piece. Now, Jamie is not a criminal because of the manosphere. He didn't do what he did because of incel culture. He did what he did because of a whole number of different factors in his life, and there are about 60 people that could have changed what happened to him. But that was the missing ingredient for me, and that was the thing that surprised me, because I looked at incel culture, and I looked at that key sort of statistic. And Jamie, by the way, doesn't describe himself as an incel. He's described as an incel by other people in the show. But I looked at that key statistic of 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. And I thought that if I was a teenager, that would have made a lot of sense to me. That would have made sense of my isolation. That would have made sense of my loneliness. That would have made sense of the awkwardness I feel a lot of the time. Yeah. And so that was the thing that then I thought, okay, I sort of know how to write him now. And I know what's influenced him, and I know about this ideology which concerns me that I feel like I can lean into.
So did that sort of then feed into the different themes for each of the episodes? We noticed that each episode touches on a different theme. So you have one that focuses on his school, for example, another on sort of social media and things like that. Is that how you kind of came about that route?
Yes, a lot of those things were in place before I even worked out the motive. Because the thing was always, how do we create this complicated perpetrator? Yeah. And we always knew we had to look inside his brain, the psychology episode. Yeah. We had to look inside his schooling, and we have to look at the education system and how that has let him down. We had to look at his parents, and those were all the sort of key spheres of responsibility that we needed to understand, and his friends too, which sort of linked through all of those episodes.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Emily, did you want to add anything?
I don't have anything to add.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kirith. Just wanted to come back on that. So you'd had those clear themes of where, I guess, the responsibility or the interventions could have happened at school or at home and friends, but not social media or influencers. Was that a deliberate choice not to have that kind of theme in with it?
Well, I think it is a theme, and I think it does run through the whole thing. And it was, like I say, part of the sort of sphere of responsibility for Jamie. But that came out in different chunks in different places. As a dramatist, you're always trying to work out ways to tell a story authentically, where you can get inside something and then little bits come out in different ways. And so the social media felt like it could come out in all sorts of different ways through all the episodes.
What I meant was that it's not like a specific influencer. It was the two of that relationship where he describes, for example, pornography. Anybody can see pornography. It wasn't the outside influence. It was the influence on social media amongst friends that was the biggest influence. It wasn't a named influencer, for example.
No, I mean, there were lots of things that make up Jamie's complicated brain, and there's lots of things, you know, if I was to describe to you what Jamie's brain looked like, it would take me 9 years to describe it, because he's a complicated mess of things, as we all are. And so all these things play a role in his head. The social media thing I thought was particularly interesting because there were ideas within it. And when I talk to kids, which is the crucial thing, there are ideas within it that really troubled me. In terms of naming influencers, that was deliberate. A couple of people talk about Andrew Tate. They're the adults. Kids don't talk about Andrew Tate. The people that concerned me when I was on my deep dive through, trawling through the internet and changing my algorithm and trying to understand what's being consumed by Jamie were if you've got your Andrew Tates at the top of the waterfall, it was the people in the middle or the bottom. It was the 15, 16-year-olds. It was the 13, 14-year-olds talking to themselves, talking within the peer group. That was the bit that I thought would have the most effect on him. And that stuff is when, you know, it's people that get 5,000, 6,000 hits on their stuff rather than, you know, 10 million or whatever it is. You know, like, you know, and that was the stuff that really I thought was most troubling, and I thought that was the stuff that Jamie would take most seriously.
I think that that's a really interesting take, because I think in terms of the media and politics in general, we talk about the big names, and the ones that, like you just said, is the adults that we are talking about, those influencers. And I think that part was really interesting, that there wasn't that. It was, as you say, from amongst the friends and from the middle to lower level kind of influencers that were the ones that were having the impact. Emily, did you want to add anything on that?
No, yes. I think that it is how Jack really described it. It was talking about the social media and the dependence on looking for answers and understanding is across everybody in all of the characters. The father, Eddie, talks about looking online for the gym and you know, what exercises he's going to do. You know, everyone is using social media, but one of the key elements and themes was how younger people who are still developing their ideas and still understanding their own identity are being influenced by everyone else around them of a similar age who are also still trying to understand their own identity. So I think that's where we got to with them.
Yeah. Thank you very much. David.
Thank you. Thank you both for coming in. I'll start with you, Jack, and then perhaps Emily, you can add to this as well. So you said you wanted to cause discussion and make change. So what conversations did you want to start as part of the show, and what messages did you want to convey?
Well, first things first, we're dramatists, right? So we weren't like thinking like politicians when we were making it. We were trying to make a compelling drama that people would watch. And I think if Stephen was here, he would say that these things aren't as important to him as they are to me, because there were different things that were important to Stephen in the telling of this show. For me, I like drama as the starting point of conversation. I think drama works best when it poses a question, and the best bit about drama is the conversation that happens afterwards. You know, that I've always wanted to be someone that spoke to stuff that, you know, when I was growing up, things like, you know, Boys from the Black stuff, things like Kathy Come Home, they spoke to me heavily, and I've always wanted to make the sort of shows that provoke those conversations. In terms of the conversations that I hoped would happen after the show, they've happened at a faster rate than I could ever possibly have imagined. And the conversations, I think, work on all sorts of different levels. It's the conversations on the sofa. You know, I grew up watching EastEnders with my mum and talking about it with her afterwards. I still remember the stuff that we talked about and what it provoked in me and the lessons it taught me about my own humanity. And then conversations in the classroom, and I've been lucky enough to be part of some conversations in the classroom since the show aired, and it's been really interesting, the things that have been provoked. through those conversations that have led to a little bit of change just in the way that classroom management might work in terms of at national level, at government level. I do think we need to think about children's access to social media, and I do think that what Australia is doing in terms of age of consent, social media age of consent, is really exciting, and we should be talking about that because it is the Wild West out there, and boys are hearing things, and girls are hearing things which are really troubling and do affect them, and not just in the form of harm, not just in the form of that they go out and do harm to other people. They also do harm to themselves through it. The amount of boys that I've talked to before and since about the way they look and what they're supposed to look like and how long they're supposed to spend in the gym and things like that. There's a tremendous anxiety and a destructive quality to the internet, which I think we as older people do not understand, and that they're right in the middle of, and I wish we were looking for ways to save them from it.
Thank you. Emily, did you want to add anything?
I think that Jack's right. This is a form of entertainment, and I think that that's what we do. We want to entertain, we want to engage with an audience, and certainly one of the things that I felt really passionately about myself was the representation of the parents and the family around the children. And when I'm making television, I'm thinking, I really want an audience to watch, and if it makes one person just question one thing, just have one different thought that they might not have had whilst watching it, then that's fantastic, and you've managed to connect to somebody. And that's what we've done, but in droves and beyond our sort of wildest imagination.
What was your one thing you wanted to ideally get out of this for the audience?
For me, it was about connection of parents and their teenagers and understanding the importance of communication.
And were there any messages that you'd envisaged that would have come out of the show that maybe weren't picked up?
Honestly, we've been picked over to an extent that I don't think any of us were expecting. So yeah, no, there's nothing that anyone's missed. I mean, I've read articles about sandwiches, about 7 different articles about sandwiches that really shocked me. Why her giving him a sandwich was an act of something or other, and it was like, whoa, no, I just had her giving him a sandwich. I didn't really think it would go this far. So yes, no, there's nothing anyone's missed.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, David. Alex.
Thank you. Jack, to you first off. The show refers to, obviously, and we've touched on this a bit, the impact of toxic and misogynistic influences on young people. Do you think those influencers, why do you think those influencers have had such a success in gaining this following in young men and boys?
Well, I think they would have. I mean, there's something about the time, and I think about the insecurity of the time, and I think, I'm guessing now, right? I'm not. There's people behind me that are specialists in this, but I think they would have had that impact on me when I was a kid. I think that line of the world is against you, and you need to fight for normality, is a very, very attractive line, and that thing of saying all these girls that you look at and you want to talk to and you don't know how to talk to, they are poisoned against you by the world. They are poisoned against you by a culture that means that you are a secondary person to them. So therefore you are in competition with the pack of boys around you in order to stand out. And I think that's a very attractive line. I think that makes sense to a lot of people, and it makes sense to a lot of feelings that you have when you're a kid about not fitting in, about feeling like you're on the outside of something rather than on the inside. I certainly felt like that when I was a kid, and I certainly did things that I'm ashamed of now. But this ideology explaining things, I think, would have made it even worse for me.
And I would just add to that, I think that from the reading and research that I had done, and anecdotally as well, I think that it's the there's a vulnerability around the people that are looking for this information. And I think that what you don't see online is as much, it is out there, is as much positive role modelling, because it doesn't scream as loudly enough. It doesn't need to. And so I think that people that are looking for an answer can find an answer, but that comes through the algorithms that will direct you to answers depending on what you're looking for. So I think that's...
Yeah.
Okay, so is it fair to say then that social media is turning the volume up massively on those messages?
I think so, and on those feelings. You know, that these are legitimate feelings that they're feeling. You know, that it's not that we're saying it's illegitimate to feel lonely and isolated and angry and all these different things, and it's found a way to tap into that.
Thank you. And so to Emily first, and then Jack. What extent, if any, have people who worked on the show been subject to personal criticism or even abuse since its screening?
Jack can definitely speak to this more so. I'd start by just saying that we put an awful lot of safeguarding around our younger cast members in particular, working alongside Netflix in this particular instance. We didn't know how global it was going to become, but we did think that people were going to watch it, and it's the younger people that will have more of an online presence. So we wrapped people around with a lot of advice and a lot of safeguarding, and we haven't had too much of a negative response towards those people. However...
Yeah, I've had a bit. And I'm very comfortable with it. You know, that I'm a bald, skinny, weird-looking man, and some people have made something of the fact that I'm a bald, skinny, weird-looking man, and saying these things, and that somehow my masculinity is the reason why I've questioned other people's masculinity. Well, if you look at how Stephen Graham looks, he looks more male than anyone else on the planet, I think. And so, you know, we're a combination of things, and we work together on it all. So yes, no, my looks have been put under the microscope a little by it all, but I'm absolutely comfortable with those questions being answered. And that's the thing when I talk about boys feeling like they need to look a certain way. When I grew up, my role model was Jarvis Cocker, right? And Jarvis Cocker made it okay to look like I do. If you're being told constantly the only way that you can have any legitimacy is if you've got muscles, that's hard for some boys. I would have found it very hard because I don't grow muscles very easily.
So actually the criticism that you've been getting is the same symptom of the problem.
Exactly.
That the show is highlighting.
Exactly.
Right? So it's
exactly.
an exacerbation. Okay, so my follow-up then is some of the criticism of the show. There have been suggestions that the show maybe wrongly portrays incels to be violent, whereas in practice incel violence is rare. That's how the criticism goes. Is that a criticism you accept?
Jamie doesn't describe himself as an incel. So Jamie isn't an incel committing violent acts. Jamie is described as an incel by others. Yeah. So it's a totally different thing. And no, we're not suggesting that incels commit violence. And we're not suggesting people who consume the manosphere stuff commit violence. What we're suggesting is that this combination of factors affected this boy in a very negative way that led to this harm being done.
Did you have anything?
I don't have anything to add.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Christine.
Thank you very much. First of all, apologies for coming in late. Can I say how much I enjoyed the programme? I found it incredibly thought-provoking. The Prime Minister actually said that as a father watching the show of this teenage sons and daughter, it hit home hard. And after he said that, it was made free for viewing in UK secondary schools. But I want you to ask, Emily, schools weren't intended to be your primary audience, weren't they? So with everything that you learnt about teenagers and your research and everything that's happened, the political reaction, do you think that watching adolescents in a school environment is the best way for children to learn from it?
You're absolutely right. Having it accessible to schools was... I don't think I've really heard of many dramas at all where that's happened. So it's a fantastic, thing for Jack and Stephen to have achieved with it. I think my feeling around that is it isn't a problem with the children. It isn't a problem with the school. I think that if watching the show allows a stepping stone for adults to have these conversations with each other, with the young people, for young people to have conversations with each other, then I think that it's a fantastic thing to be happy to go on. I think that to discuss the themes around it, I think to support that watching experience, to understand why people are watching it, then I think that it will be a really fantastic opportunity.
Do you think it needs a more structured debate possibly in schools around it?
I'd imagine, I really can't speak on behalf of the schools, I imagine no one was planning on just going in and pressing play and walking out the room again. I would imagine that there is a conversation to be had, and I do think that would be an important part, because I think otherwise, again, we're sort of outsourcing young people growing up without facilitating that discussion.
Jack, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we're a big question mark, and the answers are through discussion. And so we're not suggesting that we're the answer to anything. And so if there isn't a conversation as part of it, then it doesn't work. The conversations I've had in schools since this show aired have been very, very interesting, with people that have been through it and have led to things that I didn't even consider. You know, I was talking to a group of girls who told me that they don't speak in class because there is a group of boys in their class who scare them and who intimidate them, and so they just don't say anything. Those sorts of conversations happening within a school environment so that the school can challenge that and change that could change education for them profoundly. It isn't the show that's done that, it's the conversation after the show that's done that.
And I would just add to that an anecdotal discussion point, but just a conversation that I had been a part of with someone who was a secondary school head teacher of a large secondary school in Manchester, who didn't actually know what I did as my job, was saying, you know, it was very sort of felt as though the show sort of was shining a light just on schools, and it's not the, you know, it's really down to the parents and the families. And so for me, I think if you can engage people like that in this conversation, then hopefully that might allow, again, those people to search for answers. As Jack said, we're not offering the answers, we're just hoping this conversation has been started now.
In terms of political reaction, there has been a lot of political reaction for it. Did that surprise you? And what are you hoping that political reaction, if you're hoping, might lead eventually to?
Yeah, it's been hugely surprising, and yeah, I talked about it a bit earlier, but for me, legislation that protects our kids from the internet is a useful thing to do. I wouldn't be so bold as to say what that legislation should be, but I think it should be larger than the stuff currently under discussion. And I do think that what Australia is doing is very bold and very interesting. And if they can pull it off, I hope that other countries, particularly ourselves, would follow it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. I just wanted to pick up on one of the points where Christine had left off around facilitating conversations. Emily, you said that this isn't just that we're not going to outsource, or we shouldn't be outsourcing young people to whether it's the internet or whether it's television programs. You mentioned that there are some places that are facilitating that conversation and having good impacts. Is it possible for you to follow up in an email some of the examples or some of the schools that are doing it well, so that we can see what they're doing and perhaps learn from that for our committee?
Yes, and I believe Tender are very involved in the rollout, and they are a brilliant group of people that are thinking very seriously about discussions that happen afterwards. So yeah, no, we can absolutely do that.
Perfect, thank you so much. Catherine.
Thank you, and apologies as well for being late, but thank you both so much, and thank you for bringing this programme to us. For me as a mum of two boys, it's been really, really important. It's opened up really important conversations for me, but also I was a governor before I became an MP of a secondary school, and sexism was at best hidden, and kind of a little bit under the radar. And now I think talking to parents who've still got children at secondary school, it's not hidden and the misogyny is out there. I had one example that my son's told me quite a while ago now, of a woman teacher being a football was thrown at her during break time by a group of lads, and she couldn't do anything to stop it, and I think she was even too scared to deal with this behaviour. Now, it was obviously she was targeted because she was a woman, so if teachers are facing this, then, you know, what about our young girls? So a question for you, Jack. Based on your research for this show, what strategies do you think government and schools should implement to combat misogyny and better support young people? I know you've talked about some of this already, but are there any other things?
I mean, I'm not a specialist, so I don't think I would be able to say this is what the strategy should be. I just think there should be attention upon it. And the sexism really surprised me too. It surprised me in the research. It surprised me in the reaction afterwards. You know, I think schools are very different than the schools we grew up going to, and that celebration of masculinity that this stuff is about has caused serious problems in the classroom and out of the classroom.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, just building on some of the things you said earlier about the internet, do you think there should be stronger laws for online platforms to prevent the constant serving up of misogynistic content to boys?
Yes, very much so, and I think it should be the platform's responsibility as they're making it in Australia, and I think that at the moment they are making money off it, and that is a real problem. You know, that these people are actually have found a way to market misogyny, and that's a problem.
And I just want to add two things onto it. Would just be from some of the reading and conversations that we'd had during the research, also talking about critical thinking for young people in schools, and also not needing to focus on secondary schools, but this actually starts at primary schools. And I think that's really important, to be understanding words like banter. What does that mean to younger people at primary schools? I think that I don't think it is something that stops when it starts when you're 11. I think it's something that starts when you're much younger.
Thank you, Catherine. On that, with you said that at the start you talked about changing your algorithms, altering your algorithms. How easy was that to do? And you'd said about learning about the level of sexism happening within schools. Did it surprise you, any of the content that you were seeing, once you changed your algorithms?
Very much so. And the thing is, it's not like click on this and you'll see why women are wrong. It's click on this and we'll talk about Minecraft, or click on this and we'll talk about June. And then you're watching someone talk about Minecraft in June, and then they slip into what their day was like. And that's the stuff I think that's really problematic, because that's the stuff that kids just consume generally. You know, you don't have to, and in terms of changing my algorithm, no, it didn't take long, though it still has an impact now. So, I've kept those accounts. I lurk. I'm a lurker rather than I don't declare who I am. But that I still see a lot of that stuff, and I still find it very troubling. But yeah, no, it doesn't take long. I think there's research that it takes 23 minutes or something like that for it. Just if you're just generally browsing, for you to come across this stuff, it's very, very easily consumed.
Okay. And Emily, did you, with your research? No.
Sorry, go on.
Did it happen with your research as well, with your changing of your algorithms, or were you didn't do that?
I'm not on social media.
Oh.
So I don't...
There's this collective sigh of envy, I think, probably around this table, yeah?
I don't have... I will have an algorithm through many other things, but specifically on social media, I wouldn't have had different videos coming up to me, because I don't look...
All that stuff was my responsibility.
Your responsibility,
yes.
Okay. So you can't unsee those things. In terms of marketing misogyny, how are they making their money? Is it through advertising? Is it through some of the influencers promoting things? Or how are they or is it you're talking about the platforms making the money out of?
Yeah, I think I'm talking about everyone making money off the whole thing. And again, I'm not someone that's specialist enough to be able to answer that question.
Okay. And in terms of the social media used, what sort of social media was primarily being used by young people?
I went all over. I was on X, I was on TikTok, I was on Insta. You know, like it was everywhere. It wasn't like you can say, oh, it's this spot or this spot.
Okay. I mean, it's just that we've had evidence from faith groups as well as part of community cohesion, and they had said that there's been a notable change since Elon Musk took over X, for example. A lot of the Jewish groups don't bother even trying to engage with it now to take down anti-Semitic material because they just don't get a response.
Right.
And I think that every group that we've spoken to or heard from, and individuals that we've heard from, that it's got a worse place in terms of Facebook and X. But these are the mainstream ones. They're not even the ones that, if you are going to look for things that are deeply unpleasant, necessarily, that's your go-to place.
It was really interesting because people said, when I've said this stuff about, you know, maybe we need to think about native consent, maybe we need to think about these things, and they've gone, well, that will just send it all underground, they'll just end up on Reddit and those sorts of things. And it's like, well, no, a small group will do that. And that small group have already been polluted, and it's about protecting, my kid's 9, it's about protecting the kids that are just growing up and are just consuming things because they're consuming things. You know, like, you know, they're not going looking for this stuff, and that's the stuff that worries me. It's where it comes inadvertently at you rather than you look for. If you look for Andrew Tate videos, then you should watch Andrew Tate videos. It's when you're looking because my son is a huge fan of Tim Burton. You know, like, you know, and you start looking at that stuff, and then it takes you into a whole different realm, and then suddenly he's watching stuff that makes me uncomfortable. You know.
Yeah, my kid is terrified of Tim Burton. Sugar.
Frightened of Tim Burton.
Rosie.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to talk about TV more generally. I think we all thought the drama was incredible, and I'm a fan of Best Interest as well. That was extremely moving. But given the strong engagement from government over your drama and things like the Post Office drama on ITV, is it important that the very beleaguered TV industry gets more support from the DCMS and from the government? I'm declaring that my partner is a documentary maker, and 75 to 80% of TV industry professionals aren't working, and that includes lots of my own constituents in Whitstable. If you agree that they need to, what might that look like?
Want to start?
Well, we could talk about the issues within the industry on another time, possibly. I think this is, you know, we're really talking about the themes within the show, and I think that we sort of feel quite strongly that this show is supported within the UK, and it you know, yes, it was made with a streamer, and we also work with the public service broadcasters, and we think having that mixed economy of production in the UK is really important to support and to get back to thriving. And we're not a million miles away, but we'll need to keep working with them.
So is it significant that it was Netflix and not, say, the BBC? Or?
No, I don't think so. I think it was. I don't know, we will never know if it would have been as global if it was with somebody else. However, we had a fantastic working relationship with the platform on this particular show. But as you mentioned, a different show that Jack's worked on, a different shows that Warp have worked on, it's important for us that this mixed economy of broadcasters stays and works well within the UK.
I think TV's become quite conservative. I think the reason why TV's come quite conservative is because we are frightened about how to get international finance, and often if you're trying to do something a bit wilder, it becomes very hard to attract international finance, and it's very hard to make something for BBC or Channel 4 or ITV without international finance. And I do worry about the next generation of writers, that they will be told the way to make a show, get a show made, is by putting a murder in it. And I say that as someone that's just written a show that's got a murder in it. Adolescence has a murder in it. But, you know, if we want to create a thriving cultural industry, then we need to be allowing writers to write whatever interests them. You know, be that ice dancing, or be that, you know, postal work. And at the moment, because of this squeeze on PSBs, that is becoming very hard for writers, and I do worry for them, and I'm fine. You know, people in my generation, there's a lot of us that are fine. The younger ones, where they've got new stories to tell that will change the way we think about their generation, they're perhaps not being given the same scope that we were, and that does concern me.
Thank you. Do you think it particularly impacts newer writers coming up from different sectors of community, working class writers, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Working class writers, lower middle class writers, writers that don't live in London, writers that find it hard to be in London, but all writers that have got interesting stories to tell, you want them to be given the opportunity to tell those interesting stories, and I think they're being squashed. And I don't think it's anyone's fault. I don't think the BBC can be held at fault for that, or Channel 4 can be. I think it's the way that the industry currently is, and I think, yes, some support for it would make a huge difference and might change. If we can change this model of, it requires international finance to make a show. If we can change that model, and there are a lot of people trying to change that model within the industry and without, but if we can change that model, then we will start seeing, I think, more interesting shows made.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosie. And I think that that's really important, not just because they're interesting shows, but because for the equality and the diversity angle of some of the stories that we are being able to see and are hitting our screens, I think that's incredibly important that we do have that access.
And I think TV changes things.
Yeah.
I think TV has enormous power, and I think it speaks to our culture. And if the wrong TV is being made, then culture is being spoken to in the wrong way. If it all becomes about murders, then how are we going to see different? I'm part of the TV Access project that is trying to get more disabled stories told and more disabled storytellers in television. If we can do that, we might change the way that people treat disabled people in this country. And that came out of COVID, and that came out of a feeling that disabled people were way too easily disposed of during that time. And at a time when disability is still, disabled people are still under threat. We need stories told. Emily just told a beautiful story for the BBC that involved deaf people. That it's called Reunion. It's amazing. That this stuff matters.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Following on from that, and the fact that before we started today in our private session, I just mentioned that I'd had a meeting with an Italian senator who had watched and had seen and had loved and wants to learn more about your work and the show Adolescence. David had also, who had you met from Argentina?
So Jess Phillips, who's in our home team, she does a home office team, she does a lot of work on, as you probably know, you've met her, both of you, on this area, and she met with the Argentinian Home Secretary yesterday, who also mentioned your work and was deeply admiring of your work as well. So she said to mention that to you.
Very nice.
Yeah.
It's had huge cut through, which you both said you didn't expect to be reading so many articles about sandwiches and all of those sorts of things. Are you planning any follow-up work in this area at all?
We are. We're having some very positive conversations, and whilst we feel that Jamie's story has been told, the Miller's family story has been told, we'll be exploring what the makers of Adolescence and the writers will be doing. We'll be doing all together next.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a series 2, but there might be something else.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Fantastic. We'll look forward to that. And do you feel any additional responsibility in producing work of this type of social commentary to ensure accuracy and proportionality as well? Did it feel like a burden of responsibility to get this right?
But it always does. That's what making TV is. You're representing people and you're putting their stories on screen. I feel it more keenly when I tell real life stories. I felt it more keenly when I was doing Best Interests, where I spoke to a number of people who'd lost their children, and we actually changed the ending of that show because of a testimony of someone that, it's hard making this stuff, and you are constantly making decisions, as you do in documentaries, as you do in all sorts of forms of television, and getting it right is very, very important.
I think you've explained in good detail as to the extent of the level that you did in terms of research and how much you wanted to get this right. How does it feel when you hear, say, the leader of the opposition quote what has been described as conspiracy theories around the race of Jamie being, and she said, fundamentally changed in the story of adolescence?
I think that's to do with her algorithm. And there are a lot of people on X and in other places who make that claim and who have consumed the story that way. So yeah, that just speaks to what she's consuming online, I think.
I think we might all take a lead from Emily and not be on social media.
It doesn't make me unexcused. I do understand. I have 2 teenagers as well, so I would say that...
It's okay, I left X a while ago and my life has been happier since. But I wanted to ask that because we've seen the Takedown Act in the US, and I just wondered whether we wanted to, if there was any merit, because as you said, Jack, this isn't young people looking for Andrew Tate's or looking for Tommy Robinson or whoever it is. They're looking for Minecraft, or they're looking for a game that they like. Do you think that there would be any merit in tightening up the law in terms of porn, violent games, and even perhaps dangerous disinformation that we've seen that caused quite a lot of the riots and the violence that we saw over the summer? Is there any merit, do you think, when you saw those algorithms, that actually this isn't, it's not always advertised as harmful content, it is buried within?
Yeah, and that's why I think it should be an all-over social media ban. I don't think you can divide this up and go, oh, there's this and there's that, and you can separate that off. And if we talk to them this and that, and if you talk to the amount of kids that take their phones to bed with them, you will be shocked at how many do. It is assumed, because I think the chattering classes, you know what I mean, like, you know, might restrict phone content upstairs, that most kids leave their phones downstairs and go up without it. Actually, an awful lot do. I wouldn't guess at the numbers, because I don't think there are numbers out there. But you know, and that thing of what a kid is consuming at 2 a.m. when they wake up and they feel alone, that's the stuff to stop. Whatever that is, because it's speaking to a part of them that needs help, and this stuff doesn't help them.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's a really powerful point to end. Does anybody have any other questions before we go to panel 2?
Thank you. Yeah, I actually just wondered, it was something you were saying with the fact it was made by Netflix and all the international money that needs to be raised now to PSBs are, as you said, being squeezed in this country. Should we be looking more to the public service broadcasters to have more of a responsibility to make dramas which are thought-provoking? Because thinking back through the ones which have been the Post Office drama, right back to Cathy Come Home, I think the only one that was done by a public service broadcaster was It's a Sin by Channel 4. So do we need to request or put pressure on or suggest that actually that's a place where the public service broadcasters have a role, is to do that sort of drama?
I think they do feel that responsibility. Yeah. And I think if you watched Reunion, I know I'm now advertising a show, I was not part of Reunion, let be clear, but you know what I mean? Like, you know, if you watch a show like Reunion, that has fundamentally challenged the way that stories are told. By using sign language to the extent it does, it's changed the way that drama works, and the way that BSL works is different to the syntax of the English language, and
the subtitles don't work the same way.
Exactly. So everything has changed because of the way that they told that show, and they told it authentically, and they told it properly, and they told it with a disabled writer. So I don't think it's that no one cares. I think it's that it's really hard to make a show that has an impact. I've tried for a very long time, and you can have little impact, and you can have little impacts, and you can have little impacts, but what catches fire, you don't know. I would say I May Destroy You was made by the BBC. That had a huge impact. You know, there's a whole number that I could list that I think, you know, challenged our traditional forms of storytelling, and that came from all sorts of different places. Everyone who works at Netflix came through public service broadcasting. Everyone we worked with on this show had worked at one of those places. So we all got trained in that world, and we all made this show because of our training in that world. So I don't think it's as simple as going there, not making this stuff. I think everyone who's trying to make this stuff, it's just a very, very difficult climate to make this stuff in, because if you are trying to get the Americans to pay for half your show, you've got to take it beyond sometimes you've got to take it beyond the sort of British borders, and if you take it beyond the British borders, there's so few things that travel, you know, and so you end up going, well, if it's cops, everyone knows how a murder investigation works. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, if it's, you know, it's just about the easiness of storytelling.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think that if we had approached this as a drama about social media age of consent, you wouldn't have watched the same show.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's really important. I think that it really, and that, without sounding too whatever it is, it's really about entertaining and engaging our audience. And if the themes that we discuss for hours and you discuss even more for hours, even more than that, if they get picked up, then that is absolutely fantastic. That's brilliant. And if it's seen as a piece of entertainment, that's, you know, fantastic too. But I think that it's important to, I think the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5 do look to create conversation with their shows.
I should confess, I came up through public service broadcasting.
Thank you very much, Emily and Jack. I'm really grateful for your time, and thank you for what you've created, which is not just a fantastic and thought-provoking and incredibly moving show, but a conversation which I think all needed to be had, and I'm really grateful for your time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to our second panel. We have Matt Pinkett, Misogyny and Gender Equity Specialist, Engendering Change English teacher. Dr. Daniel Guinness, co-founder and managing director of Beyond Equality. And Darren Northcott, who is now standing in for Jane, who's the Deputy General Secretary of the NASUWT, but Darren is stepping in as National Official for Education. So thank you and welcome to you all. Very grateful for your time. And I'm going to start with David.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming in today. Darren, thrown in at the deep end, but I'm going to start with you, if I may. Just thinking about misogyny in schools, what kind of misogynistic behaviour are you seeing in schools between pupils? And do you think the level of this behaviour is changing, either increasing or decreasing?
That's a really important point. Our members report to us consistently and more than they ever have done misogyny in schools between pupils, but also I think picking up on the question that was raised earlier between pupils and female members of staff as well. So misogyny is becoming a very unfortunate but more deeply rooted characteristic feature of too many of our schools. That's the very clear message from our members.
Matt, do you have any views on this?
Yeah, I totally echo the what was said about the misogyny and the sexual harassment that's happening to